In a moment, I'll be talking to Michael Gove, who conducted the interview for The Times. First, here's the President-elect on his mother and her admiration for the Queen.
The UK, my mother was very ceremonial. I think that's where I got this aspect, because my father was brick and mortar. He was like, and my mother sort of had a flair. She loved the Queen. She loved anything. She was so proud of the Queen. She loved the ceremonial and the beauty, because nobody does that like the English. And she had great respect for the Queen, liked her.
Well, that was Donald Trump, and Michael Gove is here. What was it like interviewing him?
It was fascinating. I mean, he is a force of nature. You just need to... You don't even need to ask a question. You just need to open your lips as though you're about to ask a question, and then out it comes, commentary on everything from NATO to Twitter. Right.
And is he somebody ready to lead the free world?
Well, the American people clearly thought so, because they elected him, or rather the Electoral College did.
What did you make of him on that regard?
I think that President Trump will be different from candidate Trump. And I think...
You do think that?
Yes. I think that candidate Trump was someone who had a deliberate campaign style, which was big, bold, bombastic, brash. I think as president, of course, he's still going to be the personality that we know, but he's also going to look at things in a more business-like way. I think there's a difference between Trump, the marketeer on the stump, and Trump, the deal-maker in office.
Right. We haven't seen any evidence of a change in tack or style, and he's certainly still tweeting away. Do you think he'll continue to do that as president?
He was very clear that he'll continue to tweet. It's very clear that he regards that, he mentioned in the interview, as a way of cutting through what he regards as media distortion. But if you look at the people he's built around him in the cabinet, some of the picks like the potential Defence Secretary James Mattis, it would have been not inconceivable, but unlikely that many would have thought that someone of James Mattis's stature would have agreed to serve in a Trump cabinet. And I think that the team that he's assembling around him and some of the things that he says in the interview suggest that he will govern not in a dramatically different way, but in a different way from the way in which he campaigned.
Do you really think you gave him a proper grilling?
Well, we were there for the best part of an hour. We had the opportunity to ask questions on a range of issues. I think the critical thing is that when you are talking to someone like Donald Trump, you can try to, if you want to, argue with him, but he is like a river in spate. When you ask a question, the flow of language just comes at a torrent.
But it was nearly an hour, as you say. I know you were there with a German journalist too. But where were the difficult questions from you on his links to Vladimir Putin, for example?
Well, we asked specifically whether or not he would stand by what he said on NATO, and I wouldn't say dramatically, but he did shift his position on NATO. We also asked him about everything from the Iran deal to whether or not he was going to stand by his campaign promise on barring all Muslims, and he provided a gloss on that. But the critical thing, I felt, was it was important for me and for my colleague Kai Diekman from Bild to cover a wide range of topics and then to allow Times and, in Germany, Bild readers to form their own judgment.
Except you didn't challenge him on his inconsistencies, and there were many inconsistencies on very pressing issues. I mean, you say yourself, you did ask on a wide-ranging topics, but why didn't you challenge him? Before Christmas, he said he wanted a nuclear arms race with Russia in very provocative language. He tweeted it. Now, he says in your interview, he wants to reduce the levels. Well, which is it? That's a very important subject.
Well, you can ask the President-elect when he appears on...
But you had him there for an hour.
I did, and as a result, we managed to generate from him, I think, compelling news on a variety of issues, including a commitment to a rapid trade deal with Theresa May. Now, of course...
Do you trust that? On those inconsistencies, I mean, even if you take Syria, for example, he was praising Russia for getting involved in the Syrian conflict because they were bashing ISIS, and that was a good thing. Now, he says in your interview that actually it's helped cause a humanitarian crisis in Syria. I mean, which is it? These are diametrically opposite views. So when he says he wants a quick trade deal, do you trust him to deliver that?
Well, there are three things. The first thing is, as I mentioned earlier, I think that President Trump will be different from candidate Trump. People might say that that inconsistency is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a reflection of...
A dangerous thing, people might say, when it comes to foreign policy.
Well, I think it's undoubtedly the case that many of the things that he said as candidate are deeply worrying. I hope, in the interest of the world, that he actually rose back from some of them as president.
Right, which ones?
Well, I think that what he said about NATO during the course of the campaign was dangerous. I think in the interview he suggests a more nuanced approach to NATO. I hope that will be the case. But My role in the interview was to make sure that he could speak for himself, and then people will form their own judgments. As you say, there are inconsistencies in the Trump position between what he said on the stump and what we may see in the White House. We can form a judgment, as the American people will form a judgment, about whether or not they think that he's doing a good job. The whole question of trust is ultimately one for the American people and for the world leaders who will engage with him. I was doing my job as a reporter to ensure that he covered the waterfront, and then each of us as citizens will form our judgment. I've said before, I said during the course of the campaign that I would have voted for Hillary Clinton, and I've also said, as the Prime Minister has, that some of the things that he said are unacceptable. But there's a difference, one the BBC understands very well, between being a reporter who allows a politician to speak for themselves, as you're doing now, and an individual who can form a judgment about what they say.
It is about challenge. It's also about challenging, as you know, as a journalist and as a politician at the other end. I mean, if we look at the picture here of you with Donald Trump, thumbs up, is that very professional, do you think?
Well, the photographer, I think, did a brilliant job, yes.
Yeah, but to have thumbs up with Donald Trump? I mean, do you do that with all the politicians that you would be interviewing?
Yes, and journalists too. If you wanted to have a selfie with me afterwards, Joe, then I'd be more than happy.
Do you know, I've always wanted to ask you and never had the opportunity.
Well, now
your
could be the moment.
Your German partner in this didn't stand with his thumbs up. I mean, people might just say that that is a bit frivolous, but you don't think so?
Well, I think that people should, will have their own views about that picture. I mean, I think I've got a smile on my face, and so has he. So I think that if it provokes a smile on the face of anyone reading the newspapers, then we're entertaining as well as...
Well, on that basis, I mean, you've got there before Boris Johnson and before Theresa May in terms of FaceTime with Donald Trump, you and Nigel Farage. He's not going to be ambassador. Could you be an ambassador?
I don't think so. I think diplomacy is not my strong suit.
Really?
Yes.
Would you like to?
No. I like being Member of Parliament for Surrey Heath, and I love writing for the Times.
Well, you said you'd be a good Prime Minister. Why not a good ambassador?
Well, I think that they require very, very different skills. But we've got a very good Prime Minister at the moment in Theresa May, and a very good ambassador in Kim Dara. Right.
How did the interview actually come about?
We approached Team Trump, and the approach involved both the Times and Bilt. And the President-elect thought it was a good idea to talk to Britain's best newspaper and the most successful newspaper on the continent of Europe. Right,
and they chose you to do the interview, none of the other political journalists on the Times.
Well, of course, we made sure that we sent a professional team. Kai and the photographer did a brilliant job for Bilt. I hope that Times readers will appreciate what we did, but if people think that it was shoddy journalism, then I can only apologise. I'm still a relative newcomer to the trade. I'll hope to do better with my next story.
OK. Good interview.
Questions for me about what your job is, Michael. I mean, you're elected by the people in Surrey to represent them, and yet you talk about my job there was to generate news, not to stand up to some of the outrageous things that Trump said. Nothing mentioned in your interview questions about his comments on women, which I find disgraceful. I thought that we were your colleagues, but you're talking about a German journalist as your colleague as well. I think that creates real questions about this second job that you've got.
Michael?
Well, I think that people will form their own judgment about the appropriateness of politicians writing, but there's been
And thumbs-upping.
Well, two things. There's been a strong tradition, whether it's been Michael Foot or Tony Benn on the Labour side, or Boris Johnson and Jonathan Aitken on the Conservative side.
Michael Foot would never have done that stunt, ever in a million years.
Well, we obviously we can't know, but one thing we do know about Michael Foot is that he combined a very successful career as a crusading Labour politician with also being a journalist. In fact, he was editor of the Evening Standard and worked for Lord Beaverbrook, someone from a very, very...
Before he was leader of the Labour Party.
Yes, and I've never been and would never want to be leader of the Labour Party.
And on that...
But Mary, your point...
on that stunning piece of news that you're not going to be leader of the Labour Party. Well, I think we'll stop this interviewing of politicians interviewing politicians, but thank you very much, Michael, for coming in.
Absolute pleasure.